And now it's time for today's Fantasy Baseball 101, where we are going to dive into the three different league types. Most of the time in leagues, you're going to either encounter points leagues, rotisserie leagues, or head to head category leagues, which are kind of a blend of the two. I know for purposes of this podcast, and both Kyle and I personally, we play in points leagues. And for those of you who are making a transition from fantasy football, it's probably the easiest transition. Kyle, what is it that you like about points leagues so much?
I think it's great for newbies. It's very simple. They're pretty straightforward, easy to understand. Like you said, very similar to fantasy football. It's a great choice for beginners. And you don't need to know like all the prospects, everybody. You can just kind of know the top pitchers, top hitters, and you can focus on star players rather than trying to balance different categories. I like it. It has its drawbacks too. People say it's less real. Some argue points leagues don't capture the essence of the game. I still think you can have a lot of fun with it. I know I have, and you have. What's something you don't like about points leagues?
For me, when I play fantasy sports, I want the nerdiest experience possible. And a lot of times points leagues just don't translate to that just because you can focus on stars and more well-named or well-known players. But I think they're great for folks who are just starting out. They are a lot of fun. I know you and I have had a lot of fun playing in those kind of leagues. Overall, they're a pretty solid choice. And again, like we mentioned earlier, they are going to be the focus of this podcast. So get used to it, folks.
Yep. Yep. Just similar to fantasy baseball. Each stat has a point assigned to it. Each stat is assigned a point value. Team with most points wins, just like fantasy football. So, um, very good leagues. One of my favorites. Definitely easier in the hustle bustle of life. You might not always have time for full on roto leagues, which we'll talk about next year. Roto leagues, teams compete in multiple statistical categories, same as before, like batting average, whip, ERA, stolen bases, even. Teams are ranked in each category, and points are awarded based on their ranking. Um, what's something you like about them? I tend to like the depth thing a little bit there if I'm getting kind of nerdy, but there's some other benefits too.
I like roto leagues because they really make you think about your team construction. And even when you get into draft season, you need to think about, all right, am I going to try and punt saves? Am I going to punt stolen bases? Because as hard as you may try, you're not going to dominate in every category. And if
Right.
you can pay one, we'll say a little bit less regard, uh, that helps you beef up in other areas. And also, too, with Roto, there's moves you can make, even if you're feeling like you're out of it, to gain up ground. With a
Absolutely.
head-to-head league, if you are in seventh place and you're wanting to make the playoffs, it's not necessarily just in your hands because you need the teams above you to lose. With Roto, it's not like that. There are no playoffs. It's whoever has the most points, and I say points in quotation marks just based on the way that they score. That's it. That's who wins. If you see you're deficient in a category and really have a surplus in another, you can trade based on that. And you're still getting the stats you accumulated all through the year to that point anyway.
For sure. And if you're, like we mentioned earlier with points leagues, if you're a beginner, I would start there just to get familiar with baseball and stuff, and then maybe join a roto league. They are more complex, that they could be more challenging for beginners to grasp. And you have to commit to it as well. There's a lot of things you need to do to stay competitive in all the categories through the entire season. So just know that going in.
Yeah. And then you have I guess, the blend of the two previous leagues we talked about, the head to
Sure.
head categories. It has the head to head aspect like you would in points league, but it also has the categories aspect like you would have in a roto league. This is something where I love that it's a mix of both worlds because you do get the playoffs at the end of the season. And there is a lot of strategic flexibility that goes into how you're constructing your team, not only for the season, but for the matchup that's coming up. Kyle, is there anything that you don't really care for when it comes to those kind of leagues?
It's the variability. I think the variance on that, winning or losing a week, can be influenced by luck. or the performance of a few players. Now you can get that in points leagues. You can get that in fantasy football leagues as well. But it can be very frustrating as a team manager or team owner, for sure. Another one, some people argue it's less realistic, doesn't emulate real baseball. I don't agree with that again as well. You're playing fantasy baseball because you love baseball. You're doing that. I just don't agree with that at all. I do like that you kind of get the roto leagues with the points combined, and there's a playoff, and you have those head-to-head matchups, so you can still talk trash with your opponent, where you can't really do that in much of a regular roto league as well.
Sure. In roto leagues, they're the very old school league when it comes
Sure.
to fantasy baseball. And a lot of times you'll see those leagues set at 15 teams. That's a lot of competition for stats. And you really, really have to know the player pool if you're going to play in a league like that. And that player pool in baseball is so much larger than it is in football.
But yeah, but hey, play fantasy baseball regardless of your skill level. There's definitely a league out there, a league type out there for you. You just got to find out what's right for you, your league, and your league mates.
Thanks for stopping by for today's lesson. Me and Kyle both want to wish you the best of luck in all of your fantasy baseball leagues this year. Don't forget, we'll be right here with you every step of the way through the season. So give us a shout down in the comments, hit us up on the socials, and we'll do everything we can to help you out. Until next time, class is out.